Actually, I don't need this yet. I'll need this soon. Ooh. Is this for me? Oh. Yeah, put a sugar in it, but and a little cream. But don't worry about it. Well, good morning, everyone. Boker Tov. No, it's fine. It's fine. Good morning, everyone. Hi. Good morning. It's good to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. In the rain, in the snow, in the sleet, in the hail, you came out. The government shut down. You came out anyway. It's a great, great tribute to your love of Torah and your disdain for football. Come in. I know. They're not on till Musaf, so. Okay. We have a guest this morning, which I'll introduce him in just a moment, but just a few quick, and first of all, good to see everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for coming. A couple of, the most important announcement is that this past week our friend Mort celebrated his birthday, right? Yesterday, and he's having an Aliyah in Shul Shabbos, Thursday. Is your Aliyah? Yeah, 39, plus a few more.
Which one is it? Did he turn the odometer?
102.
No.
Honest to God.
No.
Yes.
102?
Yes. If you want to know what the Woodrow Wilson administration was like, ask Mort. He'll tell you. But so Mort, Chazaku Baruch, you continue to be strong.
What's the secret? Come on.
What's the secret to 102? Yeah, what's the secret? Thanks, Boo. Come to shul, eat kosher. Sorry, what? If he tells you, it won't be a secret. Come to shul, eat kosher, So with our blessings for good health and strength, and continue to be together with it, it'd be wonderful. Following our Torah study, we're having a guest this morning. I'll introduce him in a moment. But following the Torah study, our guest will be joining us, Rabbi Slater. Our guest will be joining Phil Cantor-Barron, and there'll be a short meditation session in here, in this room. You can just stay in the room, or you can come and join us in the other room for service. In the main room, there's the main sanctuary service, and a lovely young fellow's having his bar mitzvah. And in the front room, in the Sher Lapati, the Neshama Minyan, beautiful musical minyan will be meeting, and you're welcome to join them as well. And after that, there's of course lunch for everybody. And after lunch, there's Parsha group. So if you'd like to come and spend the day here at VBS, we're delighted. It's raining. Where else are you going to go? Right? The Rams game, right? In the rain. And then this coming week, College of Jewish Studies meets on Wednesday night. And our guest is going to be Rabbi Eli Rifkin, who's the leader of the Chabad of Northridge. And we're going to talk to him about the God you meet in Chassidut and Chabad Hasidism, and the God that he embraces, a wonderful teacher. On Friday, this coming Friday, is Shabbat Shirah, the Sabbath of Song, and all over the world Jews gather to celebrate our traditions of Jewish music. And Cantor-Barron is bringing a wonderful group to the synagogue. Navat Tehillah is a musical group from Israel, from Jerusalem, and we sing a lot of their melodies already. We sing a lot of their songs, because they're beautiful prayer melodies. And they're going to present the Friday night service to us. So join us on Friday night at 7:30 for an evening with Navat Tehillah.
Even I like them.
Even, and that's saying a lot. That's saying a lot. So, and then of course next Shabbos Torah study as usual. And there's lots more things going on. Just pay attention to the synagogue announcements. The Neshama Minyan is going on their annual retreat on February 8th and 9th. And all of the women of the community are invited to join for that. It's a wonderful retreat of learning and fellowship, friendship, and prayer, and nature. This morning we have a wonderful opportunity to learn with a great teacher, one of the great teachers of the generation. Rabbi Jonathan Slater is I think his title now is Senior Program Director of the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. For many years, a rabbi in Northern California. A wonderful teacher of Chassidut and of the traditions of Jewish meditation and Jewish spirituality, and he's in town for this institute that they're putting on. So I invited Johnny to come join us. Welcome. It's good to have you here. Yeah, if you don't mind, that way the whole world can enjoy you. And we have a handout, so if we can pass these around. Pass these around. Jerry, you want to grab these and pass these around to everybody? Thanks so much. You got to talk real loud. This group is used to real loud talk. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Very good. Okay. Is this on?
It's on, yeah.
It's on. Okay. And can you? Oh, I got it. I got to speak loud, but it doesn't matter.
No, it's the microphone through the room.
For the
It just
room.
takes it around the world.
Very good. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I would say that the title Senior Program Director only means that I have a bigger line on my business card. It didn't come with any increase in salary, didn't come with a bigger office. I work from home. Right? No change that way.
Rabbi Slater, there's not enough, so can you let people know to share?
Yes, we need to share the sheets. I know that the numbers here this morning, which look significant, are not because I'm here, but because you're used to coming every Shabbat to study with Rabbi Feinstein and to engaging in a little bit of Torah before Tefillah. Torah study before Tefillah is quite traditional. Part of the theory might be that through Torah study, we hear what God has to say to us in the hopes that when we turn around in Tefillah, God will be listening to us in turn. It may also be that through Torah study, we begin to arouse our own sense of God's place in our life or God's place in the world so that when we pray, we know what we're about, right? Who we're connected to, how we're connected to, what prayer might be. The piece of Hasidic text that I brought to begin with from Kedushat Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, again, one of the most significant and popular teachers of Hasidism, the end of the 18th century, early 19th century, really bringing Hasidut into the Ukraine and Poland. The beloved defender of Israel. You know, he's known as the one who reminds God how much we all try to do our best. And often there's that sense of, yes, we try to do our best, but if you look at the Torah, you know, we don't quite make it. And he's trying to remind God that however much we may not make it and succeed in doing all that we should be doing, we're doing our best. And that God should really investigate what it takes to do our best rather than doing everything if we can't. And in some ways, this text that we're looking at is a testimony to that. But it's also one of a lovely example of Hasidic Parshanut. That is how closely Hasidic teachers read Torah and in their reading notice things that require some investigation. So in this week's Torah portion, we have the end of the 10 plagues and the beginning of the Exodus. But of course, the beginning of the Exodus includes the instructions for the Pesach, for the Passover offering, for that first night of waiting and attending that last plague before the Israelites would go free. And we have then in chapter 12 the instructions that includes two sections that talk about tefillin and also are some of the instances where the child asks the questions of the parent that become the foundation for the 4 questions of the Seder. And those instructions then include this in chapter 12, verse 16. Well, let's go back a little bit. 383. We'll start with verse 14. There are places, I think, up here and in there, just, you know. And we're sharing text, so latecomers will just look over the shoulders of. 383, verse 14. So we have the instructions for the eve of the Passover, how to sacrifice the Passover lamb, how to roast it, how to eat it with matzah and maror, standing, with your sandals on and your loins girded and ready to go out. And then verse 14 says, "Vayah hayom hazeh lachem lezikaron," that this day then should be for you a continuous memorial. V'chagotem oto chag ladonai. Do you know the word chag? Right? Of course, we know it's a holiday. But the idea of chag is that it's a cycle. Right? It's part of what becomes the word for a tire in modern Hebrew. And it's related to the Arabic word hajj. Right? What's a hajj? It's a pilgrimage, right? And what a pilgrimage is where you start from where you live, and you go to someplace else, and then you come back again. And then you go there, and you come back again. Again, it's a cycle. So not only is it a reminder, a memorial, but it's something that you do in this cyclical manner. You bring it back into your life. It comes in, it goes away. It comes in, and it goes away. Throughout your generations, as a statute for God, for eternity, tachoguhu, right? You shall bring this in. And then 7 days you shall eat matzot, giving up chametz and so on. Then verse 16, the first day shall be a sacred convocation, and the 7th day should be so. Do no labors on those days, and so on. And then verse 17, page 385, verse 17. Ushmartem et hamatzot, right? You shall keep hamatzot. That doesn't mean shmur matzah, right? Right? Ushmartem et hamatzot. If you look at the English translation, they insert something in brackets. You shall keep at Chag HaMatzot, right? That translation says, you shall keep the festival of matzot. Ushmartem et hamatzot. Right? So that's how the Torah in this section identifies the Chag, right? The cyclical holiday that comes back over and over again as a reminder of the events of the evening of the Passover. It's called Chag HaMatzot. And then turn the page. Verse 24. Ushmartem et hadavar hazeh lachok lecha al vanecha ad olam. You shall keep this as an institution, as a requirement for you and your children forever. And when you come into the land that Adonai will give you, as God spoke, you shall keep this practice, observe this rite. And when your children ask you, Ma avodah zot lachem, what is this that you're doing? Right? What is this avodah? What is this rite, this ritual, this practice that you're doing? V'amartem zeva pesach hu l'Adonai. This is the Passover sacrifice to God. Asher pasach al batei b'nei Yisrael b'Mitzrayim b'nogpo et Mitzrayim, who passed over the houses, who danced over, who jumped over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when God smote the Egyptians and saved our houses. But what's the answer, right? So when the children ask, what is this rite? What is this observance? What is this? It's not Chag HaMatzot Ladonai, it's Pesach, right? V'amartem zevach Pesach. It is the Passover. And it's this difference in how the Torah refers to the event and the celebration, the Chok Lachem L'Dorotechem, this institution over time, Ushmartem et HaMatzot Zevach Pesach, that Levi Yitzchak hears and then tries to interpret. And that's where we get our text. So Levi Yitzchak begins his teaching based on the verse here, V'amartem zevach Pesach hu l'Adonai. You shall say it's the Passover sacrifice to Adonai. But he really has in mind these two passages. We call the festival known as in the Torah as Chag HaMatzot, we call it Pesach. Right, and that's common. I don't know anybody who says, oh my God, it's Purim, we've got to start planning for the Matzot Seder, right? It's always the Passover Seder. It's always Pesach. We've got to get the house ready for Pesach. So we call it Pesach, but the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzot. Right? Why should we call this Pesach? Throughout the whole of the Torah, this festival is called Chag HaMatzot. And he now takes us from the scriptural problem that he's set up and that he hears in these verses, and he says we should understand it in terms of ani ledodi v'dodi li. Right? What's the connection? So what is ani ledodi v'dodi li? I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. First of all, it's from Song of Songs. And when do we read Song of Songs in the cycle in the Chag, the Chiyug of the year, in the cycle of the year, in the tire of the year? When do we read Song of Songs? At Pesach, right? So if we're going to talk about Pesach, let's talk about Song of Songs. And if we're going to talk about Song of Songs, what's Song of Songs about in the rabbinic mind, in the Jewish mind? The relationship between God and the people of Israel. So, okay, the Torah calls it Chag HaMatzot, we call it Pesach. Now, that has something to do with this relationship of Ani Ladodi, I am my beloved's, V'dodi li, and my beloved is mine. It's about the love affair of God and the people of Israel. That somehow Chag HaMatzot and Pesach reflects this dynamic relationship of God and Israel, the love affair of God and Israel. We tell the praises of the Holy One, and the Holy One tells the praises of Israel. We experience this, we put on tefillin. In them is written the praise of the Holy One. What's in the tefillin? Shema Yisrael, the 4 passages in the Torah, which include these passages that immediately precede these verses, where the commandment for tefillin is included, but we say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. There's only one God, and this is our God, and we have this relationship, this unique relationship, which is the relationship of Ani Ledodi v'dodi li, right? I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. It's not I am my beloved's, and my beloved's, and my beloved's, and my beloved's, right? It's I am my beloved's, one, and my beloved is mine. What's written in God's tefillin? Did you know God has tefillin? No? Okay. Keep coming to shul, right? In about 3 weeks, we have this dramatic event. 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. I've got to count it out, right? This is Bo, Bishalach, Yitro, Mishpatim, Truma, Tetzaveh, Kitisai, right? 6 weeks, 6 weeks. 6 weeks, you can take a little vacation, 6 weeks, right? Come back in 6 weeks. Ki tisa. The story of the golden calf, right? Moses comes down. What does Moses do? When he comes down from the mountain, he's carrying the Shnei Luchot, the 2 tablets inscribed by God's finger, as it were. What does he do with the tablets? Smashes them, right? So once he smashes the tablets, as it were, sort of ending the covenant, saying, okay, this is not in force anymore, he has to go back and appeal. So he reconciles God to the people of Israel, and then he says, Hareini not kvodecha. But God, I want to see your kavod. God says, no one can see my face and live. So God puts Moses in the cleft of the rock, and he says, I'll pass by. I'll place my hand over you as I pass by. Really kind of a wild image, right? And you'll see achorai. You'll see my back. Ufanai lo yara. But you won't see, my face won't appear. And the rabbis say, what's this? You'll see my back. And they say, I'll show you the kesher tefillin. I'll show you how my tefillin is tied at the back of my head. Oh, so God wears tefillin. How wonderful. What would God have got in God's tefillin? That's what he unpacks in the next section. So let's go to the middle of that second paragraph, right? One way to constantly tell the praises of Israel, to connect with tefillin worn by the Master of the universe, the tefillin worn by God, in which the praise of Israel is written. And what's the praise of Israel? What is written in the tefillin of Ribono Shel Olam? Umi ke'amcha Yisrael, goy echad ba'aretz. Who is like your people Israel, a unique, a singular people in the world? Umi ke'amcha goy echad ba'aretz. So we declare, Shema Yisrael, you, God, are unique, you are one, and God, in God's tefillin, says we are one. So, knowing that we each have this sense of our uniqueness in our relationship, Anila dodi v'dodi li, I'm my beloved's and my beloved is mine, that each of us is engaged in this love affair, this unique love affair. We then can read the beginning of the second paragraph where he interprets a piece from a late midrash, Tana Devei Eliyahu, that it's incumbent to tell the praises of Israel, and God derives great pleasure when we praise Israel. So God doesn't get great pleasure when we praise God, right? It's like the grandmother, right? A grandmother. Who does the grandmother criticize most? Her kids. Her kids. Don't yell at your children, right? What are you making such a fuss about? Grandmother loves the kids unconditionally, right? There's no role for the grandmother to be kvetching about making a mess. Why? Because she goes home. Right? Okay, you made a mess. I still love you. Mama comes in, Papa comes in. They start yelling and crying, right? Oh, you made a mess. Come on, clean up the Legos. I'm going to kill myself if I trip on the Legos. Right? Stop screaming at your kids, right? So God says the same thing. Right? What are you talking bad about your fellow Jews? Right? Come on, build them up. God gets great delight when we tell the praises of Israel. Just as, right? Shema Yisrael Eloheinu Echad. Oh, you God are one. But we go around telling bad things about other people. No, Mid Ka'amcha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz. Who's like your people, God, a unique people in the world? We should tell the praise of Israel, and just as God does, and we should also tell the praise of God. And how do we hold this? How should we do this? Right? By keeping our attention on the tefillin, not so much on the tefillin, because Shabbos we don't wear tefillin, Yom Tov we don't wear tefillin. Our practice is not to wear tefillin outside of davening in the morning. How do we have that sense of constantly being connected to the tefillin, he says, is by being connected to the sentiment of the tefillin. Right? That our tefillin tells the praise of God, and God's tefillin tells the praise of Israel, and that's the point of this exercise. And now he comes to the name Chag HaMatzot, the festival of Matzot, is praise of Israel. Why? Because they baked unleavened cakes of dough, because it was about to go out, they were going to be driven out of Israel, nor had they prepared any provision for themselves. Why is that praise of Israel? Matzot, why is that praise of Israel? Rashi says, the Israelites on the eve of the Exodus say, should we go out into the wilderness without provisions? Right? Are we going to take the kids on a car trip without Cheerios, without Bamba, right? Without a sippy cup, without extra diapers, right? Who leaves the house with their kids without provisions? The Israelites, when told, get ready to go, didn't say, wait a minute, wait. I got to pack. I got to get the whole kitchen set. I got to take it with me. We're going into the wilderness. I need to pack, prepare for months to do this. They said no. But instead they had faith and set out. And he quotes then a verse from Jeremiah, Zacharti lach chesed ni'urayach. Right, one of the great verses in the Zichronot of Rosh Hashanah. Right? I remember in favor of the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you followed me into the wilderness in a land nor not sown. Right? Because Israel is holy to God. That's how we tell the praises of God. We just went out into the wilderness. Matzah, that's all we took with us. Ugot matzot kilo, but they didn't, because they didn't have time to bake it. So the name of Chag HaMatzot tells Israel's praise of God, since they merely baked the cakes of matzah and set out. This is why Scripture calls this festival Matzot, to tell Israel's praise. But we call the festival Pesach, in praise of God. V'amartem zevach Pesach hu l'Adonai, ki pasach Adonai al batenu, right? B'napoet Mitzrayim batenu yitzil, right? We tell the praises of God when we say Pesach, because God passed over our houses. The praise of God is, and this is Anila Dodi V'Dodi Li, that the way the Torah has these two different names, Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach, is not just because before there was a Torah, there were farmers and there were herders, right? It's like the Southwest, right? The great competition between those who want to take over the land in order to plant grain in order to sustain us, and those who say want to take their sheep and their cattle out into the fields and let them graze, right? This competition comes to be merged in Passover. We have matzah from those who grow grain, and Pesach from those who herd sheep. And the two of them become the festival of spring, of Pesach and matzah merged together. No, the two come, Pesach and matzah, in order to demonstrate the love affair of God and Israel, where God tells our praise that we just baked matzah and left into the wilderness not knowing what would come next. And we tell the praise of God by calling it Pesach, because you passed over our houses and saved us. So that's his first teaching. Right? First of all, just to get a sense of the way in which he listens deeply to Torah, right? Ushmartem et hamatzot, right? Keep this festival of matzah, and then it says, V'amartem zevach Pesach hu l'Adonai. This is the Passover of God. Right? That these two names coming in such close proximity are there to teach us and to remind us that there is some way of thinking about this holiday that actually has two different origins that come together. He didn't know about the documentary hypothesis. He didn't know about what preceded the Torah, that there was any antecedent. He didn't have any sense of that. But he has a sense of two different names. Chag HaMatzot, right, which we, in the Tefillah, of the holidays. Ya'alev Yavo, what do we call it? Et Yom Chag HaMatzot hazeh, Zman Cherutenu, we call it Matzah. But we also call it Pesach. He knows that these two, what does that reflect? And he says it reflects the love affair of God and Israel, that in these two names and in other ways, we should constantly be telling the praise of God and telling the praise of Israel. That God tells our praise and we tell God's praise. That our praise and God's praise are mutually reinforcing and echoing. And that when we tell the praise of Israel, in a sense, we're also reinforcing God's praise of us. And when we bring ourselves to tefillah and Torah study, we're telling God's praise as well. I'll stop talking. Questions or comments? Yeah. Anid L'Dodi V'Dodi Li spells out the initial letters of those four words, spell out the name Elul. It's coincidence, right? We have become, I have become dependent on my computer. So the amount of Torah, meaning the whole of Tanakh, which is memorized in my head is that which I know from having read Torah and Haftorah. The rest becomes progressively less familiar the less regularly I go over it. Chazal, the rabbis, over the generations, sat with books. They didn't have TV. They didn't have radio. They didn't have movies. They didn't have football. Right? They didn't have a distraction. And the whole of the life of the mind was one of memorization. And this practice of identifying phrases in Torah where initial letters or final letters spell out words of significance became a very important game for them. And it just happens that there is a phrase in the whole of Tanakh, Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, which the initial letters spell Elul, which is, as we're anticipating Yamim Noraim, these awesome and awful days of judgment, we want to remind ourselves, we want to remind God that we're still in love, God. There's something here that we got to work out. So even though there may be judgment, it can't be final judgment. We got to reconcile and renew our covenant. What's important, though, is that it reinforces this sense of love affair. And again, the verse in Jeremiah that Rashi refers to, right? Zacharti la chesed ne'urayach, right? I remember the chesed of your youth, right? Here the translation is the devotion of your youth. But chesed we often translate as love or loving kindness. I remember the love that we had. Chesed ne'urayach, right? Your love as a bride. The love that we felt, that Passover also is a time of love. It's the time of spring, of renewal. Right? And it's a very important piece of this. Yeah?
The typical way it's written is the people of Israel, but there's also Israel without the words people. So I'm wondering if there's a different meaning to the word Israel when it's used without people of.
I mean, in terms of translation, yeah, my translation often will go back and forth between, and it reflects, I think, also the text. I'd have to take a look at the Hebrew. In the Torah, we're Bnei Israel, right? We're the children of Israel. By the time we get to the end of the Tanakh and the destruction of the first temple and the reconstruction of the temple and then the loss of the 10 northern tribes, we become Yehudim in the sense of coming from Judea, from the territory of Judah. Very often the Hasidic teachers will referred to the Jewish people not as Jews, but as Israel. And that's a way also of promoting who we are, right? Because Israel is the name for Jacob. And Jacob is the only one of the Avot who, of Abraham, his name is changed. After his name is changed from Avram to Avraham, it never goes back to Avram. But Jacob gets the name Jacob, and he goes back and forth between Jacob and Israel. And the rabbis have the sense that Jacob is the sort of schlepper, sneaky guy. And Israel is the one who struggles with that aspect of himself and transcends it. And so when they call us Israel, as a way of talking about the Jewish people, he really wants to remind us of our higher selves. He wants to point to the fact that the Jewish people actually have a lineage of dignity and of high spiritual character. So if I translate just Israel, it's a way of reflecting his calling us Israel as a way of talking about the Jewish people. Yeah.
Could you also juxtapose Pesach and Hag HaMatzot between the last meal of the Paschal Lamb of bondage and the first meal of matzah on the way to freedom?
That's nice. I would say bring that to your Seder, right? That is, Pesach is, and the Passover sacrifice, the last meal, and matzah is the taste of freedom, except that, remember that they ate the Pesach al matzot demorim yochluhu, right? Eat the Passover with matzah. It's this very bizarre sort of thing that the Torah is not clear about. The rabbis try to straighten it out, and the Haggadah sort of separates it in some ways, right? Why did they eat matzah? Because they didn't have time to bake their loaves, so they made them quickly into matzah, and they took it with us. We say it's both lechem oni, right, poor bread, but it's also the bread of freedom. I think much more. So it's a great interpretation. I think that you're sensing that there's something about the character of the two that we want to tease out. How do they stand in relationship with each other? And how do we use that? Yeah.
Through the stories of our Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Jacob, and how they blessed their children, we learned that as the generation went forward, they learned to bless all of their children and not just the first male. Could it be that by this way of, that we are God's beloved, we are sort of projecting the firstborn to God as us being the first of the God of the monotheistic religions, and since we are the firstborn, we are giving that to ourselves? I don't know if my question is coming clear or not.
Yeah. The role of the firstborn is very complicated in the Torah. If you pay attention, the firstborn never quite succeeds, right? So who was the firstborn of Adam and Eve? He wasn't even born. It was Cain. Right? But the line of Cain is not the line of humankind. It's actually Seth, the thirdborn. So that doesn't work. And then we get to Abraham. Who's Abraham's firstborn? Ishmael. But who gets the blessing? Yitzchak. Right? Now, Yitzchak is the firstborn of Sarah. It's true. But not the firstborn in order. Of Yitzchak, who's the firstborn? Esav, right? And who gets the blessing? Right, Jacob. Who's Jacob's firstborn? Reuven. And who gets really the primary blessing? Joseph's kids, but also Judah. Right? And the tension between Judah, his fourthborn, and Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, continues throughout the period of the kings and the two kingdoms and rabbinic memory. But we are Judah, who's not the firstborn. In the rabbinic mind, they read the word Bereshit, right, in the beginning. And they know that the first verse of Genesis, Bereshit bara Elohim, makes no sense, right? You can't say in the beginning. It should be either in the beginning of God's creating, or in the beginning, God, right, comma, God created. But Bereshit bara Elohim, that phrase doesn't quite make sense. So they understand that Bereshit may mean something else. And they interpret it Bereshit. With Reshit, God created the world. With Reshit. What is Reshit? Right? Reshit Chochmah, Yirat Hashem. What is Chochmah? What is wisdom? The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. What's the beginning of wisdom? Torah. So God created the world with Torah, Bereshit, with Reshit. But also, what's another Reshit? B'ni Bechori Yisrael. Right? Reshit. What is it? I keep forgetting the ends of verses. So God identifies us as the Bechor, yes. But if you look at the history of the world, right, we may be the firstborn, but we're not so successful as firstborns, except that we've succeeded everybody else. So part of the struggle here, and this is, I think, one of the pieces that Levi Yitzchak picks up, is that when we remind God that, right, it's God, remember, right, we're pretty special here, we're your Reshit, right? In our exile, in our suffering, remember that special relationship. Because at times God, and I think Levi Yitzchak is feeling that, at times God, it's not so clear, right? There's pogroms here, right? There was Khmelnytsky. This is the late 1700s. The mid-1600s, there are massacres throughout the Ukraine of Jews. It's only 100 years before that this is that he's right. Life is not so secure. How is it possible for us to say that we're God's firstborn? So there's a need to keep reinforcing that sense of connection and of belovedness. But Levi Yitzchak is not hammering it home. He's not forcing God. He's rather seducing God and us with this text. He's saying, Chag HaMatzot, Chag HaPesach, right? Oh, there's this love affair between us and God. When we talk lovingly to God, God talks lovingly to us too. And when we talk lovingly to other Jews, when we are nice to each other, right? That also is part of the love affair that we have with God. So part of his teaching is Parshanut, but taking these two different names of the festival, he opens it up as a way of talking about how should we behave in the world with each other, and how does the way that we behave then affect this relationship of Anila Dodi V'Dodi Li, of belovedness between us and God. And that, why would he do that? So yes, he's talking to a community that has suffered. He's talking to a community that perhaps is a little bit depressed. He's talking about a community where people talk badly about each other. I don't know when that ever happened in the Jewish people, right? But he also is interested in articulating a quality of spirituality that is important for his people. And the reason that I bring it is that I think it might be important for us. When he unpacks the Torah in this way, he's reminding us that we shouldn't read it in two dimensions. I think that when he reads the verse with which he begins, V'amartem zevach pesach hu l'Adonai, right? Ki yishalcha bincha, v'aya ki tavo, ki amru alechem b'nechem, right? This is back to verse 26. When your children say to you, Ma avodah zot lachem, what is this ceremony? What's this avodah? What is it about continuing Jewish spiritual practice? Right? We're not doing the Pesach. Nobody here, right, keeps sheep in their backyard. Right? It's illegal in Los Angeles County. Right? And none of us slaughter our own sheep and then roast them in a pit in the backyard and eat it with matzah and maror for our Passover. So we could read this passage and say, yeah, okay, that was interesting. That happened a long time ago. We've got this long and glorious history, but it's history. And we read this because it's interesting, but it has nothing to do, it doesn't speak to me today. And Levi Yitzchak and all the Hasidic teachers are going to say, Maida hava hava, right? Whatever happened, happened. Okay, that's interesting. Tell me what's important for me. And when he reads the next verse, V'amartem, he hears it as saying, you and you and you and you and me should be saying, V'amartem zevach pesach hu. You should be saying that God is in love with us and we're in love with God. He hears V'amartem. This is something that we should be doing. And he gives us a way to do it, which is not about roasting a lamb and eating matzah and maror in that way it was done on the first Pesach, but doing it in a way that is a lived experience day by day. Taking the experience of the Exodus, I come out of Egypt every day when I say, right, Shema Yisrael, and Mikam Ha Yisrael. When I say, you, God, are one, and your people are one. When I tell the praises of Israel, that's how I come out of Egypt. Because every day that I have a grudge against somebody else, when I'm broigas with somebody, when I'm angry with somebody, when I turn around and say, it's really great that you got the Chabad rabbi coming to talk about the God that you meet in the Hasidic text, right? And you should come and not say, okay, but who is that, right? Come and say, another Jew, right? I got all sorts of things with Chabad, but I have to check myself. Umikam Cha Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz. Okay, how am I going to live even with them? That's what coming out of Egypt is. And that's how I do it every day. That's how I do it sometimes 10 times a day. Right? You read the paper. And here's where I would say we're not going to stay in the Hasidic realm, but we're going to perhaps move towards what we might call a neo-Hasidic realm, where Arthur Waskow and others have reminded us that Yisrael means God wrestler. And it's not just we who wrestle with God. I think everybody in the modern world wrestles with God. The most fundamentalist, faithful person, Jew, Muslim, Christian, anybody else, has to struggle with God in a world that doesn't look like the fundamentalist world. So everybody's got to struggle with God. So when I talk about Umikam Chai Yisrael Goy Echad Ba'aretz, I can say, don't talk bad about Jews, but I can also say, don't talk bad about anybody. And when you read the paper, there's plenty of people that I don't want to talk good about. And it becomes Egypt. It becomes a place of constriction, of limited vision, of stinginess, because I carry it from, oh, I'm going to cut you out of my consideration. Once I've cut you out of my consideration, it becomes a lot easier to cut other people out of consideration. I don't have to pay attention to the homeless. I don't have to pay attention to those who are hungry. I don't have to pay attention to those who are furloughed. It's not me. It's not mine. V'amartem zevach pesach hu l'Adonai. Yes, we do that at the Passover Seder. That's part of the response to the children and the 4 children of the Seder. But Levi Yitzchak comes to Parshat Bo, just as you're coming to Parshat Bo. You're going to go inside. If you don't stay for meditation, if you stay for meditation, we'll go inside. Bar Mitzvah will read. We may come to this passage, V'amartem zevach pesach, and say, okay, yeah, God told the Israelites back then you should say zevach pesach. And it's still, we've got an extra month between now and Pesach. It's just Shvat. And then we have the first Purim, and then we have the second Purim. I got 3 months to think about this. Right? I'm not there yet. He's saying, no, V'amartem, you and you and you and me, every day should be saying, V'amartem zevach pesach. That we have to come out of Egypt and praise God, and God, knowing that God praises us, so that we can praise other people as well. Mark.
So, Rabbi Feinstein has helped us to understand that one of the great challenges is to accept the story, to accept the Jewish story as your story. So, it strikes me that Levi Yitzchak has confronted the 2 fundamental elements of the dialectic of accepting a story. The first is that the story is built on an event that happened in the past and will never happen again. That's the Zevach Pesach. The skipping over our house was an event in history, a miracle, an act of divine chesed and liberation. The second, Shmartem et Matzot, is the symbolic reenacting of the story that can occur every year. So the only way that a historical event can become a part of our story is by symbolically reenacting it. And that's why there's these 2 sides. The first that can never be repeated. Otherwise, its miraculous nature is desiccated. And the second that we not only can reenact, but need to reenact. And that, I think, is the distinction. That's why it's not, and also, I think that's why he specifically doesn't say, V'chaltam et matzot. It's shmartam et matzot. You shall guard the matzot. Why not eat it? What's this guarding it? And the point is that you're guarding the story of it. You're not guarding the bread. Mm-hmm. You're guarding the story of what it means. Mm-hmm. And by guarding the story, you teach it to your kids and you keep the miracle alive. Finally, there is Buber and his understanding of the 2 ways that this story of the Pesach became symbolized, the 2 great ways, the Eucharist and the Pesach meal, which he describes brilliantly and briefly in this sentence. He says, the Eucharist is a meal eaten of God, and the Seder is a meal eaten for God. And those are the 2 ways that humankind has found to symbolize the leaving of Egypt.
One of the things about the Jewish mystical tradition is that it reclaims in a more dynamic way the cyclical element of Jewish consciousness rather than the linear. Or along with, not rather than, along with the linear. One of the things about the story, right, the historical event, is that it was once and non-occurring, right? It doesn't recur. That's the power of history. That's the foundation for ethical action. I do this and it's not, you can't undo it. But there's tshuva. And tshuva is return. And return implies curve, right? Some sort of movement that changes course. The chagotem is cyclical. It is about movement. So one of the things that the mystical tradition, the Hasidic teachers bring up is that, yes, we came out of Egypt only once in the terms of the Torah. But the liberation, the experience of being redeemed from oppression in order to truly serve God happens each year, that we enter into the same spiritual relationship of the Exodus. And they take very seriously, you know, in every generation, we have to see ourselves as if we personally came out of Egypt. They actually say, yeah, I'm coming out of Egypt right now, as if it's actually happening on a spiritual level. But they also understand that if we leave it just for Passover time, for the value of Passover to be reinforced, that we often lose out on an important driver of spiritual life. And that's why I think this drash, he could have given on Pesach. But it was included in his Sefer as a commentary on this Parsha, which in, Berdichev, in the Ukraine, is read on this Shabbos as well, right? It happens that living here in Los Angeles, we have climate very much similar to the land of Israel. So next Shabbat is Shabbat Shirah, and next Tuesday is, Monday is Tu B'Shvat, right? Tu B'Shvat Higia, what does that mean? Zman ha'ilanot, right? The time for the trees to blossom. It's going to start. It's coming. Spring is around the corner here. It may be raining, it's cold, we know, but you're going to see it in the next couple of weeks. The trees begin to blossom. Things change here. In the Ukraine, not so much. Right? So his teaching here on this Shabbos about Ani l'dodi v'dodi li takes the story and brings it into an immediate experience now about how we're supposed to live day by day. Part of an early part of the Haggadah, of the Magid section of the Seder, is this, seemingly it doesn't make any sense in the Haggadah. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Hare ane kiven shivim shana, right? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, it's as if I turned 70 overnight, right? It's like I'm a 70-year-old. I've worked so hard to understand Torah. But I couldn't figure out where the Torah teaches us that we're supposed to talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim in the evening service. Ad Shedarsha ben Zoma, until Ben Zoma came and gave this drash, and he said, Kol Yemei Chayecha, right? You should remember the day of your coming out of Egypt, all the days of your life. Yemei Chayecha Yamim, right? Yemei Chayecha signifies you're supposed to talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim in the morning. Kol Yemei Chayecha, right? Halelot. That's why. So what do we have? In the Shacharit service, just before we come to the Amidah, what do we stand and sing? Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, right? We talk mi chamocha because the crossing of the sea was the conclusion of the Exodus. That's when we really were free from Pharaoh. And so we talk about Yetziat Mitzrayim in the morning, and the same thing in the evening. The third bracha in the evening that concludes Ga'al Yisrael, God who redeems Israel, is also about the Exodus. So Levi Yitzchak understands, here's a reinforcement of that in a lived sense. Not just Uzachartem, remember, Va'amartem, you have to say it. What do we say? That God is special to us. Ani l'dodi, I belong to God. V'dodi li, and God loves us. Don't talk bad about Jews. And I would say that in a, again, neo-Hasidic, modern context, don't talk bad about anybody. Because that sunders the relationship of Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine, when I live in a relationship of love with God and with others. And he draws this out of the text itself, the textual problem of Pesach and Matzot. And he also hears the lived word of Va'amartem, not as addressed to the Israelites in Egypt, saying that someday later, after you get out of Egypt and, settle in the land, right, Va'amartem, then to your kids who don't remember, they weren't there, they have no connection to the old country, gefilte fish, yuck, right, what is that? Or, how could you eat that stuff? Or why do you talk like that? And they don't get Jewish humor, whatever, right? When the kids say, why should I live a Jewish life? Then, Va'amartem, that's when you should say, and in a sense he's saying, that means every day. You should be saying, Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I am my beloved's and my beloved is mine. And that works both in the vertical and the horizontal. No matter what, this story and this enactment, but living Torah is Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. It is learning to live a relationship of love with all people. And he draws it out of the Torah in this way. But most importantly, it's Va'amartem, right? He hears the Torah saying, Va'amartem, right now, here today, Va'amartem. Right now, us, Va'amartem. We're supposed to remember God's grace to us, taking us out of Egypt. But if we remember that, and that alone, it's not enough. Because we also have to remember to tell the praise of Israel, to love other Jews and to love all people. Last question.
I would like to compliment the Rabbi, our speaker. Very beautiful, very moving. I would like to share with you another interpretation. You're not going to like it. You're going to resent it. You're going to criticize it. But I have to tell you... No. Right? Ani l'dodi v'dodi li. I'm not discussing that verse. I'm going to give you another interpretation very quickly,
Okay.
and you're not going to like it.
Go ahead.
There is a dichotomy, as you said in the beginning, between Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach. According to biblical scholars, We have to keep our minds open to interpretation. There is no connection that Chag HaMatzot was a pre-existing festival and was superimposed upon them by the Egyptian story. And modern biblical scholarship says that one has really nothing to do with the other, but we can learn from both. Period. You're not going to like that interpretation. I'm not saying that I accept it, but my mind is open to biblical scholarship, and this is one of the teachings of Bible scholarship.
There you go.
Amen, Selah.
See, I think it's the other way around, Hillel. I think Zevach Pesach is my butcher, Chag HaMatzot was Manischewitz. They both bought the rights to the holiday, and they had to squeeze them both in. And if anyone would like the holiday named for them, you could speak to me later. I want to thank Rabbi Slater for being with us this morning. I want to wish everybody good Shabbos. There's service in the sanctuary. There's
something to your
neshama
attention
in
because
the
you spoke about Bereshit
Shirlapati. There's
in the beginning.
meditation
In the
in this
beginning,
room.
Bereshit is
Shabbat
not in
shalom.
the beginning.
Right.
It means firstly.
Yeah.
Firstly. And the sentence makes sense. Firstly, God created.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying it to you because you kept saying Bereshit. It doesn't make sense. The sentence.
The rabbis, I mean,